when you have emotional experiences that run deep for you, triggers and residue often show up, and we have to understand what to do with it. But rejection is something that so many people, not just women, men and women, both men and women are afraid of being rejected. And we show up in our relationships in really disconnected ways nowadays because of this fear of rejection, because rejection is something that too many of us, and I'm going to include myself in that because I definitely have dealt with rejection issues since I was a child. It was very strong and very impacting for me, how I felt. My father rejected me. And actually, my rejection came in really, really early. My rejection hit me, the energy of rejection, before I even came into the world, because my mother was going through a lot of stuff when she was pregnant with me. And when I was born, my father was very disappointed that I was another girl, because he was married before and had 3 daughters from his first marriage. And I think he just really wanted a son. And so, you know, there was a lot of things that I felt energetically when it came to not being accepted and not being enough. And so I really want us to talk tonight about, you know, let's kick rejection in the butt, having the courage to kick it in the B-U-T-T, or I prefer to say the A-R-S-S. Have you guys ever been affected by rejection to a place where it just really emotionally impacted you at a deep level? And do you deal with it now as an adult? And how does it show up? I know for me, rejection has been a recurring theme in my life, in that I've had to like continuously face it, because I didn't realize how much the fear of being rejected impacted me in my career and in my business in the beginning. You know, social media is a big deal when it comes to, you know, how we feel being accepted by other people. As a matter of fact, I feel like social media has done a disservice to many people in so many ways, because people are constantly looking for external validation, constantly looking for likes, comments. If somebody comments negatively on their posts, it can just like, you know, totally throw them off. You know, there's like so much meanness. People nowadays are just really mean, and that can make a lot of people feel rejected, right? So I just really want us to talk about having the courage to kick rejection in the butt, because this is something that men and women deal with. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with the gentleman the other day, and you know, being in the dating scene right now, and one of the things that he was saying is, you know, men are afraid of being rejected too. And I said, yeah, I understand that. And then my question is, so if everybody's afraid of being rejected, how do we come together in relationships? And not just relationships of intimacy, not just, you know, lovers, even with business, you know, like how do we come together? You know, people who are seeking jobs, it's really difficult for a lot of people right now. A lot of people are struggling right now, mentally, emotionally, financially, and it is having an impact on a lot of people's health. You know, people are stressed out. People are so depressed. The rate of suicide is at an all-time high. You know, people just don't know how to deal with a lot of the emotions and stuff that they're feeling. And it's because, you know, we just really haven't been taught some things, you know. So rejection impacts all of us in one way or another. It's something that we all experience, you know, whether we experience it as children or we experience it as adults. And many times rejection causes us not to be our greatest self. So many people are afraid to fail. So many people are afraid to hear no. But all of those things are a part of life, right? All of those things were a part of life. I was having a conversation with my son the other day, and, you know, he's been, you know, going through some things, but he's in his 30s. So in your 30s, that's the season of figuring out your shit, to release your shit, shame, hurt, insecurities, and triggers. And we all have been impacted, affected by shame, hurt, insecurities, and triggers, right? And rejection is something that we all experience, and it can make us feel really insecure. I was speaking to a woman the other day, and she was saying, you know, she feels like such an imposter. She feels like, you know, she's portraying herself as something that she's really not. And, as we went into conversation and she started telling me about herself and the things that she does, she's amazing. But so often we feel like we should be doing so much more. We should be having more of an impact. There should be more to life, right? And I understand, because I'm at a place in my life right now where I really desire to experience more meaning in both my professional and my personal lives, right? So yeah, there are times where, we are going to desire for the more, and I believe that we can have it. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people allow the fear of rejection or the fear of what other people are going to think or what other people are going to say about them to create a hindrance to them moving forward. I've done it. Has anybody else on here allowed the fear of rejection to keep them small? I had an epiphany in my career a few years ago, and I just said, I need to be more ambitious. Why am I not going after it a little bit more? And I recognized it was that rejection thing showing up again, because you don't want to fail. You don't want to hear no. You don't want to not be accepted. But is rejection a part of the life process? Tell me what you think in the comment section. Do you feel like rejection is a necessary part of the life experience? It's something that we have to experience. And if you believe it's something that we have to experience, then tell me why you believe that. I believe it's something that we all have to experience because we all experience it, right? Whether it's when we're children and we're not liked by the other children, or we're criticized by the children, or we're criticized by our parents, or we're criticized by teachers. I had all of that, but I was always that very strong personality. And I would ask questions all the time in school. And I was very challenging to my teachers, not in a negative way, but I say I was very challenging to them because I made them have to be present to do their job, because I always had questions. I never was that person who just took it at face value, who just took what people said. Especially if it didn't feel right to me, I had to ask questions. And as a child, my mother always dreaded going to parent-teachers night, because the first thing she would hear is Danica, Danica, Danica. When she would say that she was Danica Penn's mother, right? They're like, Danica, Danica, Danica. But the beautiful thing for me was in my 12th grade year, when I was going to graduate, my homeroom teacher, who had been my homeroom teacher for a bit. He was my homeroom teacher when I was in the 6th grade. So he had watched me grow up. And he said to my mother at the last parent-teachers conference, he said, Danica has gained the respect of every one of her teachers. And that was powerful for me, because I always felt like I was opposed. I always felt like I was criticized when I was a child. But that still impacts you. That impacts you deep. Because it affected me deeply. It affected me emotionally, right? So anything that affects us emotionally at a deep level and affects us emotionally in a negative way is something that we can tend to carry with us throughout life. And it shows up as triggers, right? Because a trigger is the manifestation of an unhealed emotional wound. Right? That's why we get triggered by things that people say, or we get triggered by things that people do. And it's not something that's always here. But when we respond or react to something emotionally as a trigger, we do ourselves a service by going into that a little bit deeper. Like, what is really going on right now? Because it's never about the other person. It's always about us, the individual, always. And so, rejection is one of those things that we have to deal with. Whether it's that you apply for a loan and you're rejected, you go out for a job and you're rejected, you put yourself out there in the dating scene and you're rejected, or you don't feel like anybody is accepting you, right? It's something that we deal with throughout our life. I feel like rejection gives us an opportunity to really sit in self-love, to really sit in self-reflection and, self-identification. It gives us an opportunity to sit with ourselves and decide who we are. So often we're just looking for, other people to validate us and say that we're okay. But that's putting yourself at a disservice, because if you give other people the power to validate you in that way, you also give them the power to invalidate you. And if you don't feel good about yourself, and then somebody tells you something about you that's negative, or they reject you, then it really makes you feel bad about yourself. And a lot of people will argue that they love themselves, but most people don't. Because, I mean, honestly, most of us don't even know what love is. We're looking for a feeling with regards to love. Now, I believe that a feeling does accompany love, but love is not a feeling. Love itself is not a feeling. You know, it's an energy, it's a vibration, it's a frequency. It's creative, it's nurturing, right? It's kind, it's patient. So I had a conversation with a client today, and, you know, we're talking about the relationship between her son and her son's father. And, you know, her son doesn't feel loved by the father because the father does not express love. He expresses criticism and judgment and this hardness and this aggression. And love doesn't make you feel like shit. So if love is present and you feel like, if love is present, I'm sorry, you don't feel like shit. You know, the opposite of love is making people feel like shit, you know. And I feel like when you say you love somebody, there should be a feeling that comes along with that. Whether you ever say it to the person or not, there should be this energy that is present that makes the person feel love. But when you've experienced rejection as a child, or when you've experienced rejection as an adult, sometimes it can be really difficult to even open your heart, because rejection hurts and we are afraid of being hurt. Nobody wants to be hurt. And so we tend to close ourselves off, and we tend to deny ourselves often of the thing that we really, really want, because we're afraid to be rejected. It's not a good idea to go through your life fearing being rejected and keeping yourself in a holding pattern because you're afraid of how people are going to receive you or not receive you. So, you know, one of the things that I've decided for myself personally is to have the courage to kick rejection in the ass, because rejection was something that definitely limited me from being great. It did. But I allowed it to, right? Because we either allow fear to take hold of us and stop us, or we decide that we're going to feel the fear and do it anyway. You know, I read that book several years ago. I cannot remember the name of the author right now, but, you know, if you are able to get that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, it's an excellent book, you know, just really encouraging you on how to move through, because fear is something, you know, we're all going to face. You know, I've been speaking for years and years, and still whenever I get on stage to speak, initially I'm terrified. You know, I get cotton mouth and, you know, my heart starts racing, you know, because again, we think about how are we going to be received by people, or how are we going to be perceived by people. And often we put too much validation and stock into that. You know, the bigger question is, how do you receive yourself? How do you perceive yourself? Because whatever you think about yourself, you vibrate in that frequency and that energy, and you're going to attract people to you who are going to support how you feel. And so that's why life coaching is so effective, right? Because we're not all going to play basketball. We're not all going to play football. You know, you get a basketball, football, tennis coach to help you to be more skilled and better in your game to win. We're not all going to do that, but we are all going to play the game of life. We're all living a life. And, you know, the truth is we're not really taught how to do life successfully. We're not taught how to be emotionally and mentally intelligent. Mentally intelligent, we go to school, right? But emotionally intelligent, we're really not taught that. And even when it comes to school and learning, school doesn't teach you about life. Life is a whole other classroom, a whole other classroom. And, you know, in my opinion, tell me how you feel. I feel like we can only truly learn life by living it. And we learn as we go along, and that's okay. We're never going to know everything. We're always evolving, always expanding, always growing, always learning. Wisdom is the application of knowledge, right? And I just feel like the longer we live, the wiser we get, because the more experience we have, the more we're able to learn, the more we're able to know. You know, that's why little whippersnappers, when they, you know, act like they know everything, us grown folk, we just smile. It's like, you're going to learn. Just wait. live long enough, right? And as we get older, we can do it in a really calm way. I remember when I was parenting my kids, oh my God, I used to get so agitated. Now it's like, okay, one day you will see, with a smile, right? But rejection, is something that we need to learn to face and move through it anyway. Don't be so concerned and consumed about how other people are going to think about you and what other people are going to say about you and how they're going to receive you and whether someone is going to give you an opportunity or they're going to like you. Like yourself, sit with yourself, look at how you reject yourself. We reject ourselves in so many ways. Oh my God. I sure did. As a young whippersnapper, I used to pick myself apart from the rooter to the tooter because I always felt like I was being picked apart from the rooter to the tooter. But maybe the truth is I was being picked apart from the rooter to the tooter by other people because I was doing it to myself. But my experience of rejection came in, the first recollection I have of my experience with rejection was from my dad. I just felt like I was never good enough with him. I felt like, there was always something wrong. I actually remember myself, even as a 3-year-old child, sitting out on the back step of our house and just feeling really sad. My mom went through a lot emotionally, and we understand this as we get older. Sometimes, we can't process our own feelings, much less try to be there for our children. But our children don't understand that. Children do not understand that. I didn't understand that at 3 years old, sitting out on the back steps of the house feeling very alone, right? So when you feel rejected, a lot of times you feel very alone. You can feel lonely. You can feel afraid to put yourself out there. You don't want to apply for the job in case, you're rejected. You don't want to swipe right? Swipe right on the dating app in case that person is not going to like you. You don't want to approach people. People don't approach people anymore. People don't approach people anymore. People are so afraid of being rejected, of hearing no, of failing. They focus so much on that they can't even live freely and powerfully. And so, we have to have the courage to kick rejection in the butt. Don't let the fear of rejection inhibit you from being great. Don't let the fear of rejection inhibit you from being loved. Don't let the fear of rejection inhibit you from loving, from opening yourself, from opening your heart, opening your hopes and your dreams.